Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for coming together to immerse ourselves in this rich body of wisdom we call Torah that we both inherit and add to. We are in Parshat Netzavim-Vayeilech, which begins in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 29, with verse 9. We'll read through the English translation of our weekly portion. I'll share with you a focused study about it, and then we'll open it up for our collective collaborative conversation about it. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute at this time together, we can have the opportunity to give thanks for this moment of immersion and being together. Baruch
atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam
asher
asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Thank you, God, for the opportunity to immerse ourselves in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah. I'll share with you the opening verses, and I'll invite others to have an opportunity to read as well. Book of Deuteronomy, chapter 29, verse 9. You stand this day, all of you, before Adonai your God, your tribal heads, your elders, and your officials, all the men of Israel, your children, your wives, even the stranger within your camp, from wood chopper to water drawer, to enter into the covenant of Adonai your God, which Adonai your God is concluding with you this day, with its sanctions, to the end that God may establish you this day as God's people and be your God, as God promised you and as God swore to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I make this covenant with its sanctions, not with you alone, but both with those who are standing here with us this day before Adonai our God, and with those who are not with us here this day. Anna, would you like to read a little bit, starting at verse 15?
Thank you. Well, you know that we dwelt in the land of Egypt, and that we passed through the midst of various other nations through which you passed, and you have seen the detestable things and the fetishes of wood and stone, silver and gold that they keep. Perchance there is among you some man or woman, or some clan or tribe whose heart is even now turning away from our God to go and worship the gods of those nations. Perchance there is among you a stock sprouting poison weed and wormwood. When hearing the words of these sanctions, such a one may imagine a special immunity, thinking, I shall be safe, though I follow my own willful heart, to the utter ruin of moist and dry alike. God will never forgive such individuals. Rather, God's anger and passion will rage against them till every sanction recorded in this book comes down upon them, and God blots out their name from under heaven.
Thank you. Sherry, would you like to read starting at verse 20?
Thank you. The Lord will single them out from all the tribes of Israel for misfortune, in accordance with all the sanctions of the covenant recorded in this book of teaching. And later generations will ask, the children who succeed you, and foreigners who come from distant lands and see the plagues and diseases that the Lord has inflicted upon the land, all its soil devastated by sulfur and salt, beyond sowing and reproducing, no grass growing in it, just like the upheaval of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah and Zeboim, which the Lord overthrew in his fierce anger. All nations will ask, why did the Lord do thus to this land? Wherefore that awful wrath? They will be told, because they forsook the covenant of the Lord, God of their fathers, made with them when he freed them from the land of Egypt. When they turned
to the service of other gods and worship them, gods whom they had not experienced and whom he had not allotted to them. So the Lord was incensed at the land and brought upon it all the curses recorded in this book. The Lord uprooted them from their soil in anger fury and great wrath, and cast them into another land, as is still the case. Concealed acts concern the Lord our God, but overt acts, it is for us and our children ever to apply all the provisions of this teaching.
Thank you. Richard, you want to read a little bit starting at the start of chapter 30?
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. When all these things befall you, the blessing and the curse that I have said before you, and you take them to heart amidst the various nations to which the Lord your God has banished you, when you return to the Lord your God, and you and your children heed his commands with all your heart and soul, just as I enjoin upon you this day, then the Lord your God will restore your fortunes and take you back in love. He will bring you together again, all the peoples where the Lord your God has scattered you. Even if your outcasts are at the ends of the world, from there the Lord your God will gather you. From there he will fetch you, and the Lord your God will bring you to the land which your fathers occupied, and you shall occupy it. And he will make you more prosperous and more numerous than your fathers.
Thank you. Tom, would you like to read a little bit starting at verse 6?
Yeah, thank you, Rabbi. Then the eternal your God will open up your heart and the hearts of your offspring to love your eternal God with all your heart and soul, in order that you may live. The eternal your God will inflict all those curses upon enemies and foes who have persecuted you. You, however, will again heed the eternal and obey all the divine commandments that I have enjoined you upon you this day. And the eternal your God will grant you abounding prosperity in all undertakings, in your issue from the womb, your offsprings from the cattle, and your produce from the soil. For the eternal will again delight in your well-being as that of your ancestors, since you will be heeding the eternal your God and keeping divine commandments and laws that are recorded in the book of the teachings, once you return to the eternal your God with all your heart and soul.
Thank you so much. Margot, would you like to continue there at verse 11?
Surely this instruction which I enjoin upon you this day is not too baffling for you, nor is it beyond reach. It is not, excuse me, it is not in the heavens that you should say, who among us can go up to the heavens and get it for us and impart it to us, that we may observe it. Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who among us can cross to the other side of the sea and get it for us and impart it to us, that we may observe it. No, the thing is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart, to observe it.
Thank you. Let me invite Dave, if you'd like to continue there at verse 15.
I set before you this day life and prosperity, death and adversity. For I command you this day to love your God, to walk in God's ways and keep God's commandments, God's laws, and God's rules, that you may thrive and increase, and that your God may bless you in the land that you are about to enter and possess. But if your heart turns away and you give no heed and are lured into the worship and service of other gods, I declare that you, this day, that you shall certainly perish. You shall not long endure on the soil that you are crossing the Jordan to and possess. I call heaven on earth to witness against you this day. I have put before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life, if you and your offspring would live, by loving your God, Adonai, heeding God's commandments, and holding fast to God. Therefore, you shall have life and shall long endure upon the soil that Adonai swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give to them.
Thank you, Dave. Justin, would you like to read a little bit at the very start of chapter 31?
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. And Moses went, and he spoke the following words to all Israel. He said to them, "Today I am 120 years old. I can no longer go or come. And the Lord said to me, You shall not cross the Jordan. The Lord your God, he will cross before you. He will destroy those nations from before you so that you will possess them. Joshua, he will cross before you as the Lord has spoken. And the Lord will do to them as he did to the Amorite kings, Sihon and Og, and to their land, all of which he destroyed. And when the Lord delivers them before you, you shall do to them according to all the commandments I have commanded you." Be strong and courageous, neither fear nor be dismayed of them. For the Lord your God, he is the one who goes with you. He will neither fail you nor forsake you. And Moses called to Joshua, and he said to him in the presence of all Israel, "Be strong and courageous, for you shall come with this people to the land which the Lord swore to your forefathers to give them, and you shall apportion it to them as an inheritance." The Lord, he is the one who goes before you. He will be with you. He will neither fail you nor forsake you. Do not fear and do not be dismayed.
Thank you so much, Justin.
Thank you.
And David and Susan, would you like to continue there at verse 9?
There. Thank you, Rabbi. Moses wrote down this teaching and gave it to the priests, sons of Levi, who carried the ark of Adonai's covenant, and to all the elders of Israel. And Moses instructed them as follows: every 7th year, the year set for remission, at the Feast of Booths, when all Israel comes to appear before your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, in the place that God will choose, you shall read this teaching aloud in the presence of all Israel. Gather the people, men, women, children, and the strangers in your communities, that they may hear and so learn to revere your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and to observe faithfully every word of this teaching. Their children, too, have not had the experience, shall hear and learn to revere your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, as long as they live in the land that you are about to cross the Jordan to possess.
And Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses, "Here, your days to die have come close. Call Joshua and stand up in the tent of meeting, and I will command him." And Moses and Joshua went and stood up in the tent of meeting, and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh appeared in the tent in a column of cloud. And the column of cloud stood at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses, "Here, when you're lying with your fathers, this people will get up and whore after foreign gods of the land into which you are coming, and it will leave me and break my covenant that I've made with it. And my anger will flare at it on that day, and I'll leave them, and I'll hide my face from them, and it will become prey, and many bad things and troubles will find it. And it will say on that day, isn't it because my God is not present in me that these evils have found me? But I'll hide my face on that day over all the bad that it has done, because it turned to other gods. So now write this song and teach it to the children of Israel. Set it in their mouths, so this song will become a witness for me among the children of Israel. When I'll bring it to the land that I swore to its fathers, flowing with milk and honey, and it will eat and be full and get fat and turn to other gods, and they will serve them and reject me, and it will break my covenant. Then it will be, when many bad things and troubles will find it, that this song will testify as a witness in front of it, because it won't be forgotten from its seed's mouth. Because I know its inclination that it is doing today, even before I bring it to the land that I swore.
Thank you so much, both of you. Let me invite Robert. Would you like to continue there? We're at verse 22.
Yes, thank you. Moses therefore wrote this song the same day and taught it the children of Israel. And he gave Joshua the son of Nun a charge and said, Be strong and of good courage, for thou shalt bring the children of Israel into the land which I swear unto them, and I will be with thee. And it came to pass, when Moses had made an end of writing the words of this law in a book, until they were finished, that Moses commanded the Levites, which bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord, saying, Take this book of the law and put it in the side of the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be there for a witness against thee. For I know thy rebellion and thy stiff neck. Behold, while I am yet alive with you this day, ye have been rebellious against the Lord. And how much more after my death? Gather unto me all the elders of your tribes and your officers, that I may speak these words in their ears, and call heaven and earth to record against them. For I know that after my death ye will utterly corrupt yourselves, and turn aside from the way which I have commanded you, and evil will befall you in the latter days, because ye will do evil in the sight of the Lord, to provoke him to anger through the work of your hands. And Moses spake in the ears of all the congregation of Israel the words of this song until they were ended.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. That is our entire double portion for this week, Netzavim-Vayeilech. I'd like to share with you a bit of focus study about it. So if you have a copy of the study sheet, I invite you to take it out. And this year, I was focusing on what we read towards the very end here, this from chapter 31, verse 19. Now write down this song, the word in Hebrew, shirah. It can be translated either a song or poem. Write this song down and teach it to the people of Israel. Put it in their mouths in order that this song should be a witness for me among the people of Israel. Well, that verse generated a lot of interpretation and commentary about, well, what exactly is this song that is being taught to the people of Israel as a way to recall, if you will, the covenant that they have among themselves and with God, the path of God that allows them to live a fulfilling promised life. Well, Rashi here on number 2 says, well, it's very clear. This song refers to what we're going to be seeing next, which is in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verses 1 through 43, which begins with, Give ear, O heavens, let me speak. Let the earth hear the words I utter. May my discourse come down as the rain, my speech distill as the dew. And then it goes on for another 40 verses. So Rashi says that's the song that is being taught to them. On the other hand, we have some other interpretations about what constitutes the song that's being taught. And we find in the Talmud this reference, that this verse that we just read, write down this song, is being used as a proof text for this commandment that each person is to write down a Torah scroll as it is written. Now write for yourselves this song and teach it to the children of Israel. So there the Talmud is saying, no, it's not just those verses, chapter 32 through 1 through 43, verses 1 through 43 in the book of Deuteronomy. It's the entire Torah that constitutes the song that is being taught to the people of Israel. Well, close to the same time that that's being written, that interpretation being written, there is another commentary on this text called Megillat Tanit, which says, teach it to the Israelites. That refers to the written Torah, the scriptures. Put it in their mouths. That refers to the halachot, the oral law. So that is now expanding beyond the verses from chapter 32 of Deuteronomy. It's expanding beyond the written Torah. It's now encompassing not just what has been written, but all of the interpretations, the oral law that's developed over hundreds and hundreds of years. So the notion that the song could consist of both the written Torah and the oral Torah is quite interesting, because the oral Torah is in fact clearly a human enterprise, which is designed to draw down from the divine wisdom, the divine language, into human language exactly what does all this mean. So these are interpretations of Torah. So the fact that it is a human enterprise, excuse me, that is being included as part of this song greatly expands the notion about the nature of the discourse, the language that is being passed on. So the Torah, on one level, is a book about the source of wisdom, God. But even more than that, it's a book about readers. It's about our capacity to perceive and our capacity to address the consequential enigmas and uncertainties and ambiguities that are a necessary part of life. Indeed, in the Talmud, we also read that one Rabbi Yanni, said, had the Torah been given in a fixed form, it would not have had a leg to stand on. Meaning that if it was purely what you see in the black letters in its finite form, then it would have been like one of those grand statues that over time, excuse me, begins to collapse under its own rigidity. And so there is built into the enterprise that we call the oral law, the recognition that the only way this can really exist for the eternity that it is meant to exist is if it's constantly being revitalized, revived, and interpreted. And that is not a divine act, that is a human act. So the notion that the song that we're being encouraged to learn is, in a sense, a song that is never done. It's never finished. It's an ongoing song. And to the extent that we sing it, we are already beginning to add to it by our intonations, our interpretations, our emphases, what we decide to leave out from the song, what we forget from the lyrics of the song, what we may ad lib in terms of adding to the song. So the song then becomes a very dynamic exercise rather than something that's rote, something that's memorized and that would be articulated the same way by each person. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs puts it beautifully when he notes that when we want to really bring life to the Torah, we need to go beyond the prose language. We need to develop a different kind of language that's more dynamic, that's more creative, that's more destabilizing in a sense, and that is poetry or music. So he writes, Judaism is a religion of words, And yet, whenever the language of Judaism aspires to be spiritual, it breaks into song, as if the words themselves sought to escape from the gravitational pull of finite meanings. If you turn, I have a quote from the Netziv. He was a rabbi and began in Russia and I believe eventually winds up in Warsaw. And the Netziv is an acronym for his actual name, which is Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin. He lived about 1816 to 1893. And he wrote this: there is a distinction between poetry and prose. In poetry, the subject matter is not plainly set forth as in prose. Additional explanations are necessary in order to indicate the allusions condensed into each expression. Such is the nature of Torah. Its story is not elaborated. It requires additional explanations in order to appreciate its allusions. There's a way in which the Torah itself resists being a closed book. It resists being a completed enterprise. And that is why the great disciples of Torah, the sages of Torah, the students of Torah, that's the way they approach this body of wisdom, which is to help resist the Torah's fate of being a closed book, of being finalized, by sustaining it, by continually to innovate the understanding of what is before us. So this notion about resisting the closure of a book, resisting any kind of final answer, resisting any kind of completion of this beautiful work called Torah, which in a sense we're coming to the close of in terms of reading the end of here, the book of Deuteronomy. This is an active resistance, creative resistance to seeing this as something that is finalized, totalized, and complete. And when I thought about that, I thought about artwork that takes the same approach, that resists having what's on the canvas be viewed as a final completed project. And there is an aspect within art, a form within art called non finito, that which is not finished. And many works of art are unfinished, sometimes because the artist died before completed it, sometimes because the artist's patron refused to pay any more money, so the artist stopped working on it. But there are many works of art in which the artist, for whatever reason, intentionally decided not to fill in every detail, not to complete the painting, and to render it to us in that state of being. So I have here as the painting that I wanted to share with you this week on the front of the study sheet, painting Rough Sea by J.M.W. Turner. Now, J.M.W. Turner was one of the great landscape painters, one of the great romantic painters of England, and he defied convention in many ways. In terms of his own personal lifestyle, born in London, he never overcame his Cockney accent, which many artists who grew up there did, because by overcoming that accent, it allowed them to appear more polished and allowed them to gain access to high society and to perhaps advance their personal careers. And Turner chose not to do that. He also chose to avoid all the big social events that many artists went to as a way to cultivate patronage and so forth. And perhaps most compellingly, in terms of his artwork, he chose not to paint those elements that were considered the height of painting, which were representational art that focused on themes of either history, mythology, biblical scenes, or portraits of wealthy people or those of royalty. Instead, Turner embraced painting landscapes. And landscapes were viewed by the hierarchy in the art world as the lowest form of subjects that one could paint. But that's what Turner was fascinated with. It appears he was fascinated both by the effect of light. He was enthralled by the sense of power of nature that he saw. And here in this painting, Rough Sea, this is considered to be one of his unfinished paintings. And what you see here is there's virtually no representational detail that's here. What we see is maybe sky and the foam of water, and there seems to be some kind of a dark element in the middle of it. Hard to tell whether that dark element is a seawall, whether it is a land, whether it is a ship of some kind. So one is now left to wonder, well, what exactly is on this canvas? And that seems to be the power that Turner is handing over to us. He has experienced something, and he's sharing that experience with us, and he's leaving it up to us to wonder, what is going on there? What do I see? How do I experience it? And that's the way it is with anything that is full of absence as much as presence, because absence then presents a mystery, which invites stories and interpretations. And we, as the viewer or reader or listener, we are enlisted in the work's fulfillment. And so I want to acknowledge there was a patron, well, actually a painter who was a contemporary and a friend of Turner's, Lady Trevelyan, Pauline Trevelyan. She was both an artist and she was also a wealthy woman who held a salon at her home in England, where she would invite artists and writers to discuss the latest in creative works. And she said this about Turner's works. She said, "You never get to the end of a picture of his. The more you look at it, the more you find in it." And that's the way I think it is with art that presents itself more as discovery than message. And so I thought of these words that Robert Frost once said, "I have never started a poem yet whose end I knew. Writing a poem is discovering." I want to suggest that's what I experienced when I read this material this week, this song, that as the Israelites are getting ready to leave behind the wilderness and enter into this place that they call to settle in this land of promise, that what they're being reminded of is that they have a duty, an obligation, and indeed their very own life depends upon their capacity to continue singing the song. That it is a song that is not done. It's not final. It hasn't reached a totality of completion. That it is only by our continuing to add to, if you will, add our own creativity to the work that has been done, that we find a true life. So I would love to hear from you what you experienced and saw during the course of our time together. And I want to acknowledge, I know there were some remarks in the chat room. I want to acknowledge Martin wrote early on, what are these other gods that are being referred to? And just for an initial response is, there's a notion that, historically, the Israelites witnessed other peoples not only worshiping other gods, but leading a different life and having a different sense of their own purpose of being in this world. And to have a God that embraces crossing over, a crossing of boundaries. That is ultimately what Hebrew means, those who cross boundaries. That this is full of transitions and innovations and questioning, and that is what sustains us rather than building these solid structures, which, as Rabbi Yanni and Talmud says, if everything was just finalized and fixed, ultimately, like the great statues of Pharaoh, they would crumble. What sustains it is the ongoing innovation that we make to this great body of wisdom that we get. So let me call upon David and then others who would like to share as well. David and Susan, and then Richard.
So I love the fact that God tells us I think in the first book, the first one that we read, that we're gonna stray. But when we come back, which means we are coming back, that all of these things will be there for us, and that he will take care of us. And that portion also says that we shouldn't think of it as something outside what we can reach, outside what we can understand, outside of ourselves. It is here. It is within us. And I just love that. That's just so beautiful and so helpful.
I picked, my eyes and ears were focusing on that as well. That's such a beautiful notion, isn't it? That the wisdom is not something that's outside of us. And in a sense, that's what these artists who do these unfinished, these non-finito works are acknowledging, which is, I've accessed a part of this experience, but you carry wisdom within you as well. And if I can do something that evokes that from you, that brings that out of you, then that's really the work of art, not just what's on the canvas. So thank you.
Right. And it also says in this portion that it is for everybody, not just those that were there at that time, but for future generations, and for those that couldn't make it, I guess, for whatever reason.
What you remind me of, Susan, is that the great American poet Wallace Stevens said that poets are priests of the invisible. And it got me thinking about the phrase from our Torah, which is, you shall be a kingdom of priests. In other words, you will be a people of poets because all of you have the capacity to access the invisible. It's not just up to a relegated class of people to do that. So thank you for that. David? Okay, let me call upon Richard.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Rabbi. There are a couple of things in here that really touched me. I know that this is part of it is served up at Yom Kippur. Return, and the Lord will open your heart that you may live. That, he who is busy being born is living, and if he's not being born, he's in the process of dying. And this is telling us, keep this up, keep this up, keep this up, keep me in your hearts. And I remember it brings to mind the prayer, may the words of my mouth be acceptable to thee, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. This scripture, put it in their mouths. And that putting in their mouths opens up to actually getting the affect that we're projecting onto God of his compassion. And we give voice to that through our actions in the world. And we do that because every week we pour through it, not to find out what to do, but to be in his presence And two more small things. In Ginsburg's Legends of the Jews, and this gives voice to Moses not going over the Jordan, Rabbi says, and he's going to lead us. Don't worry about it. Well, Ginsburg points out that what happened was, or the legend is, that he took him up, God took him up to the burial ground there, and he refused to lay down, refused to die. And finally, his soul, she came and told him that she'd made a deal with God and that he'd lay down and give it up, but she would lead the people, as opposed to in this it says God will lead us. Well, what's the difference? But the feminine part. And the reason when he stood at the rock and pounded it with his stick because he got impatient, he was called upon after Miriam had died, the woman had died, the water and spirit were gone. He was to gather the people together and have them converse. And he couldn't do it because they didn't know how to converse. And what this is telling me is this is all about conversation which hears one another, which is what we're struggling through now in our political sphere. To how do we see the two sides of the animal and share, not compromise, but synchronize or synthesize these polarizations that are going on. And I think this offers a clue of how to do this and what it takes to express the absolute in the real world, in the physical world, by being open-hearted, so that the divinity or I and nothingness, that energy, can come through and bring the rest of the best part of us out. And so we read it every year over and over and over and over again, and add more to the song. And I've had enough airtime.
So what you got me to think about, Richard, is
sorry, one more last thing. Thank you. You got down to Robert Frost.
Yeah.
And I remember for me, that speaks to what you're talking about. No closures, no barriers, is his famous line, which always got to me. Something there is that does not love a wall.
Thank you, Richard. I'm going to actually come back towards the end about something that you reminded me about, but let me call upon some other people first. Let me call upon Robert and then Norm. Please, Robert.
Yes, thank you again for another lovely evening. You know, I really like this painting because it's for me, it's somewhat captivating, because what I see in it is the emergence of passion and interpretation. And even though it may be considered unfinished, I think it stands really strong by itself. Because for me, there's something in there that calls, and I love that. The other thing that came to my mind, and again, thinking of art, you know, in the age of the classics, they were born out of a culture that said, thinking is rigid. You will obey the church. I don't know how it was with the Jews, but certainly in the Christian community, churches, it was very rigid. Independent thinking was absolutely not encouraged. Galileo will testify to that. And so that art, as exquisite as it is, and you go through the Louvre, and it's just amazing. But it does not call one to reflect, except on war or the arrogance of a person or how feminine men looked in those days. But with the advent of the 1800s, there's a whole different kind of art that's born out of a whole different kind of culture. Because now we live in an age of wonderment, if you will, an age of discovery, not only in the sciences and the arts, but in the way of thinking, searching for meaning, searching for truth. It's a whole different world that we live in. And when I see when I see art like this and modern art, frankly, that I like or can relate to, and most of it I can, what I see in them often, over and over, is the searching of a soul for something, some ultimate meaning. And so those are my thoughts for tonight.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna, you got me to thinking about some things I'll also go come back to in just a moment. Anna, did you want to say something? Then I'll call on Norm.
Okay. What I find really interesting about this painting of the sea, if you just look at it, glancing at it, it looks like more like maybe wheat fields or maybe like a dust storm or something like that color-wise. And I got my phone out and just flipped through Turner's paintings, which I would just so recommend we all do. They're just exquisite. And he often does not use the traditional blue or green colors or shades of blues and greens and whites for his ocean paintings. They're he's catching a feeling in there of a storm and the horror of it and all, which maybe sometimes the ocean and the sky look that color of yellow, but not too often. He's really expressing the character of what he's painting without doing it in all. Sometimes he does very realistic colors. I mean, he's an exquisite painter. He's absolutely perspective and detail and all that. He absolutely can do that. But the fact that he chooses to express and that he's able to express himself, so like in song or poetry or with these paints on the papers, it's just amazing. So take a little trip through your phone and look at some of his work. It's just a blessing too.
Thank you. Okay, and Norm, and then Tom.
Okay, I'm going to try and give you a few more things to go back to afterwards. You're going to have a lot of them. Moses was told not to go into the promised land. And we have stories in Torah where people don't listen to what God says. I wonder if Moses didn't think, I'm just going to go ahead and go. I'm just going to go ahead and go. And that might be something that he thought about, something that he struggled about. If he hadn't thought about that, I'd be a little disappointed. But it's just something that struck me. The brought up the issue of Torah as a living document. The question is, what is this song? Is it just the part in the that Rashi says? Is it more in the Torah? Is it all thinking that goes along after that? And anytime there's a new thought, a new idea, maybe something that doesn't jive or goes a little bit against the grain, then the question is going to come up, is this part of the song or is this not part of the song? And that's going to be a eternal issue of not conflict, but I would say discussion and struggle.
Yeah.
I've never seen this picture before. I wasn't even aware of the artist Turner. It's really pretty interesting. I see the dark area with a little white thing pointing out with the dark thing on top of the white thing. It looks like a lighthouse to me, and it strikes me as dry land. And the towards the right, there's this maroon colored object, which I would see as a boat. The boat's struggling for its own survival in the turbulence of the sea. The boat would like to be on the dry land where the lighthouse is, but it can't because the lighthouse is there, so you don't go there, especially in a storm. And if my lighthouse is a little strange because it's not up straight, it's a little bit curved, which makes me wonder whether the perspective of the whole picture is a little bit left to be determined.
Fantastic. All great materials. And just a comment on the first one that you made about Moses, which is in part that's what Richard's referring to, which is a story that in Midrash that Moses said, resisted dying before getting into the land. And there was this great struggle. Angels went down to try and convince Moses that it was time to die, and he scared them away. And it took finally a kiss from God for Moses to accept it. So
Yeah, Moses got into it with God,
yeah,
and he wasn't reprimanded for that.
no,
That's interesting to me.
yeah, it was part of his nature. It was part of his nature that was help overcome Pharaoh and got people through the desert, and so his nature was still there at the edge of the end of his journey. Let me call upon Tom and then Justin. Yeah, Tom.
A question or comment. The first one, it's in Nitzavim, it's chapter, it starts on verse 11. Surely the instructions which I join upon you this day, not too baffling, nor is it beyond your reach. It is not in the heavens that you should say, who among us can go to the heavens and get it for us and impart it to us that we may observe it? Neither is it on the sea that you should say, who among us can cross to the other side and get it for us and impart it to us? No, the thing is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart to observe it. It's a comment about heaven, and I'm not going there, but I just like to know what. So is he saying there is no heaven? It's in us.
Well, I think the notion there is that you don't need to cross a great sea in order to access this. You don't need to ascend all the way to heaven in order to access this. It's actually within you. I think that's the poetic imagery that's being conveyed here. Yeah.
All right. And then the second thing, I think God had way too much coffee the morning he got up and did all this. God, it was scary what he was saying, what he's going to do to you. And what if I was born an Amorite or Hittite or a Jebusite? My father was an Amorite, my father's father. For generations, I've been taught this is my God. I truly believe this is my God. And I'm sure they had rules. They were a civilization. They had codes of ethics and things like that. And, I just don't know what to say about that. It puzzles me.
Well, that's good that it puzzles you, because we don't want to take this body of literature to turn us into people who then vilify people because of their upbringing. And that's why the rabbis are very clear by the time they begin reading this in a deep and subversive way, which is that don't use this literature as an excuse to wage war against people, calling them Jebusites, because there aren't any of those people around anymore. So you can't vilify someone purely because of some kind of ancestry, which is so attenuated at this point.
Can we pick on the Catholics?
I'm sorry, what?
He's joking with you.
Oh, okay. Let me call upon Justin. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this time, Rabbi. Learning so much. Thank you. I'm really enjoying the Turner. And to me, it continues to move into deep levels of indeterminacy and dreaming. So, but it continues to keep the activity and the process of the dream. If there's a lighthouse, it's still in the indeterminacy. And there was a thought about, that when I've seen Turner, sometimes I feel like the sense of the space, the intuition of this great feeling, just dynamicism is sometimes his figures are stiff when he tries to put figures into this great, he's still working with it. But and yes, I do see that, and I really appreciate the warm colors, the ochres that are going into this particular version of the ocean, to really imagine into it and to feel into that ochre of the stirring of seaweed and sand and a stormy day. Sometimes it really does feel like that.
Wow, that's beautiful, beautiful language, beautiful
Nice.
imagery that you share with us. Just and what you've all got me to remember is that our Jewish mystics say in particular that divine language is infinite, because the source of that language is infinite. Human language is finite. And so there's this constant tension between trying to use finite symbols to express something that is infinite. And in a way that's meant to humble us, I think, to recognize that no matter how we articulate, no matter how beautiful our paintings, how beautiful our poetry, how beautiful our prose, it remains a mere finite reflection of something that far expands beyond what we can begin to express. And so in a sense, maybe that's what Turner is also doing here, which is acknowledging the sea, something which is so expansive, and he dare not try and put anything that has completion in the picture here, because that would desacralize the experience of the sea, which is the closest thing perhaps he could get to experiencing the infinite. And so to put something in there that begins to confine it, that begins to define it, would be a sacrilege. And so that should be, I think, the way that what it means to live a spiritual life, I think, means we have to live in these finite bodies. We have to communicate with these symbols that we call words, which are finite and constrained. But we need to do it in a way that has that sense of humility, that I know that what I'm saying and what I'm drawing and what I'm singing is very contained aspect of something that is uncontainable. And so I hope that you receive it that way, and that you will then help expand the limitations of what I'm sharing with you by breathing more air into it, by breathing more meaning into it from your own experience. And so I think that is the gift of Torah, is that it proclaims itself as an unfinished work. It proclaims itself as not being completed. It proclaims itself as mere finite expressions of something that is infinite. And the only way to begin to access the infinite is to continue the innovations that we carry within us, as this portion tells us. It's within us. It's not a final product that has boundaries to it that we can go out and get outside of ourselves. It's something that we have to all find within ourselves. And because it's within all of us, it's truly infinite in its capacity to express compassion and beauty and wonderment. I want to thank each and every one of you for contributing to this sense of wonderment. We will not be having our Torah study next week, Rosh Hashanah. I hope everyone has a year of rich fulfillment, peace, joy, happiness, love, creativity, and a continuing sense of what a humbling experience it is to be a finite being having access to the infinite. God bless you all. Look forward to our next gathering. Be well, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Shana Tova,
Shana Tova.
Best wishes, friends.